Hey y'all, how you doing? How about we just jump into the stories without me running my mouth? Alright, here we go. He was sitting in his stand early in the morning hoping to see a large 8-pointer he knew frequented the area. He got to the area early in the morning before the sun was up, climbed up to his stand, and poured himself a cup of coffee from the thermos and prepared to wait. Sure enough, as the sun was coming up, he spotted the buck. He noticed the buck was hesitant to enter the clearing. The hunter didn't think the deer had winded him. The wind was wrong for that. Eventually, the buck got over its jitters and walked to the middle of the clearing. He had a clean line of sight, and he took the shot. It was a kill shot. The deer jumped when the bullet hit it. It fell to the ground, got up, staggered 20 yards, and fell dead. Immediately, he heard something crashing through the woods close by. A huge creature came into view. Without breaking stride, it ran to the deer, grabbed it by the antlers, and dragged it off into the woods on the other side of the clearing. It happened so fast that the hunter had no time to be afraid. He hung on the side of that tree with his jaw hanging open, wondering what the hell had just happened. At first, just for a second, he wondered if he had imagined the whole thing. He doubted his sanity for a minute. However, where the deer had stood, there was blood. Beyond that was a wide swath in the leaves and brush, evident the deer had been dragged off. To quote the man who experienced the encounter, "I have never given one thought to Bigfoot, ever, and I've hunted deer for many, many years. But that's what that thing was. It couldn't have been anything else. It must have been waiting to see if I killed a deer, and I never even knew it was there. I don't hunt that area anymore." This report is submitted by Mary Fabian of the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Project. You can find her YouTube channel by doing a search of Pennsylvania Bigfoot Project. My last sighting was in April 2018 on a research trip along with Tim Coonbow Baker, along with about a dozen other friends out in Oklahoma. We had a fantastic week of research. We were on our way back to the hotel from a night of field research. It was after midnight. One man in our group had trouble with his truck, so our whole caravan of 8 pickup trucks pulled over into the parking lot of a casino. The parking lot was brightly lit and half filled with other vehicles. Several of our group had their heads under the hood of the ill-running vehicle, while myself and 3 others sat in our truck. 2 of the truck's occupants were messing with their phones, while myself and the man beside me in the front seat were watching out the window. We were facing the front of 2 buildings. A huge figure burst out from the alley between the 2 buildings and raced across the parking lot. It was easy to see under the bright lights. He towered above the vehicles. I was in total shock. Our eyes were locked onto the creature as it moved through the parking lot at a full sprint, through a ditch, and then across a 4-lane highway until it vanished in the woods. Highway speed limit signs are installed at 7 feet from the elevation of the driving surface to the bottom of the sign. The signs are usually 18 to 24 inches tall, making the total height of the sign about 9 feet. This creature was taller than the sign it ran past as it crossed the highway. Later, I used Google Maps to get a rough distance from the hotel to the woods across the highway. We think the creature was visible for 3 to 4 seconds. Using some crude math, the creature's average speed was 52 miles per hour. I have never shared this with anyone except close family members. When I was 17, I was asked if I would fill in as a ranch overseer for a place in New Mexico. It was a place I had been several times before. They were friends of my family, and the man who owned the place took 2 weeks off every fall to go on a holiday somewhere other than the desert. I would be there alone for 2 weeks. That was good with me. The property was next to the Gila National Forest, located in a small valley with mountains on both sides. I got to stay in the ranch house and had full access to the whole place. I was free to do whatever I wanted. I started my chores that first morning. The job was caring for the horses, feeding them, cleaning out the stalls, and a few other small tasks. It was very easy. That took until noon, and the rest of the day was free. Several days later, I used my free time to take a hike. I had walked a couple of miles away from the ranch structures, and I noticed a coyote across a ravine looking for food. I shifted my eyes a little to the left to another area and saw a huge creature running full speed up the side of a large hill. It was actually a mountain. It was strange just to look over and boom, there was this thing running. I had never thought about Bigfoot in my life, but I knew exactly what this thing was. I don't know how far away it was, but I could clearly see it. I could make out a few details. It ran like a man. It had the same posture, and its long arms swung back and forth like a human runner. The color was between red and brown. There was no way to make out facial features, nor whether it was male or female. Even though it was running away from me, fear was the main reaction that I had. The creature never once looked back at me, and it ran from the ditch close to that coyote and all the way up that mountain. It never stopped. Humans can't do that. I watched it crest the top of the mountain and vanish over the other side. When it was out of sight, I felt some relief, like I didn't have anything to worry about now. It was time to get back to the ranch, so I turned and started walking. Not afraid, but just a bit anxious. Not far from where I had turned around, after seeing that crazy sight, I noticed a strange smell in the air. It was bad, like nothing I had ever experienced before. Could this day get any more strange? I wrote the odor off as a dead animal, and I continued on. The next morning, I felt uneasy and guarded. My senses felt very sharp. Sounds and smells seemed heightened. I went about my chores as usual, maybe somewhat distracted, but I got it all done. Nothing unusual happened for the next 2 weeks. Everything was quiet, and I felt like I was getting back to normal. But every now and then I would hear something on that mountain that sounded like a carpenter framing a house. I knew there was no construction going on up there. I would hear these sounds late in the evenings every day. I figured it was someone far off doing some work, and I just figured that sound carried really well through those mountains. By the day before I was to leave the ranch, I had pushed the whole event out of my mind and was starting to have fun again. I wanted to go back out into the wild places around the ranch, but I was not going to that mountain. I chose a path going the opposite direction. There were plenty of places to explore in that direction too. There was a mountain in front of the ranch house that always looked cool to me, and I set out to climb it on the last afternoon. It was a tough climb even for a 17-year-old kid. I was in good shape, but I thought it would be more fun to pace myself. It took an hour to get up there. When I turned around and looked down at the ranch, it blew me away how beautiful this place looked from that elevation. I sat down and just took it all in. I must have sat there for an hour. The sun was getting low in the sky, and I thought that I'd better get moving. I looked down into the valley once more so I could remember this view. And then from behind one of the barns on the place, I saw a huge figure walk out. It was so easy to see with its dark color against the terracotta color of the dirt. It was looking at the ground and walking. It would stop, look up from the ground, and then continue walking. I just watched it. It was heading in my general direction, and then it hit me. That thing was looking for tracks on the ground. It was following my tracks. Just before it became obscured in my line of sight by some treetops, it stopped and looked up the mountain right at me. Again, I'm a terrible judge of distances, But this thing was a long way down that mountain. But there was no mistaking what it was looking at. And then my line of sight was cut off by the trees as it moved towards the track I had taken up the mountain. It was coming for me. I didn't know what to do. If I ran away from it, it would just run me down. I had no options. The only other direction I could go was straight at this thing. So I moved in that direction. When I had traveled about 100 yards or so, I would cut off into the woods and follow another track back down. I picked a line and got off my track and ran as fast as I could down the hill for several hundred yards, and I stopped and held up behind a large boulder. I needed to know if this thing was in front of me, behind me, or still below me. I crawled to the top of the rock and got real still, and I watched. The sun was behind me, so I had a small advantage. A figure appeared to my left, moving up the hill. I had gotten off my original track just in time. Another 2 minutes, and I would have run right into him. It was parallel with me in elevation and moved slightly uphill from me and stopped in a spot that I could clearly see this thing. It looked at the ground and then raised its head into the air, and it started sniffing like a dog. I could hear it inhale as it took in every scent that it could find floating in the air. I was struck with horror at what I saw in the last sunlight of the day as it shined directly into this creature's face. It was not a Bigfoot. It had a muzzle like a dog. Its nose looked like any dog I have ever seen, black and shiny from the moisture all dogs have usually on their noses. Its ears were tall and ended in points and twitched back and forth like a domestic dog searching for any sound that would give me away. Its yellow eyes searching the brush in front of it, but it never looked my way. I never moved. I never even took in a breath while it moved around in that area, looking to pick up my track. And then it moved up the hill on the track I had originally taken up the mountain. I slid down the rock and looked down the hill. The terrain looked rough, but I would be going downhill. I waited for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then I bolted from my spot straight down the mountain. At the angle I was running, it was easy to take huge leaps in the clear areas, and I would slow down when I ran into scrub brush and trees. I did not want to break an ankle in this place. I needed to get to the ranch house and behind some locked doors. I never heard a thing the entire run down the mountain other than my feet hitting the gravel and dirt and my own breathing. I popped out at an unfamiliar angle to the ranch, barns, and house, but quickly got my bearings and sprinted across the dirt to the house and locked the doors behind me. I never slept a wink that night. The owners returned the next day and we exchanged the usual chatter. They paid me and I headed to my car. The man who owned the place walked me to my car and mentioned that I seemed a bit shaken up. I told him I was fine and I just needed to get home. And then he said something that really creeped me out. "You saw it, didn't you?" I said, "I saw something twice, but I have no idea what I saw. At first, I thought it was a Bigfoot, but I saw it up close yesterday on that mountain, and it's not a Bigfoot, it's something else." And then the man said, "These things have been on this land for hundreds of years. It was not going to hurt you. It had never seen you here and was curious who you were. I should have told you about them, but I didn't want to scare you." That statement pissed me off. I never said another word. I wadded the money he had given me into my pocket. I dropped into my car, and I drove away. I got home, and within a couple of weeks, I felt normal again. Back to normal. Almost normal. Life went on. The couple called me for 3 more years after that, asking if I would house sit their ranch again while they went on vacation. My answer has always been no. I have never been back to that place again. I'm 56 years old this year. Okay, once again, thank you so much for clicking on the video and listening this far. Hope you guys have a good end to your week, and we'll probably have a video out this weekend at some point. All right, you guys have a great week. We'll see you soon. Thanks.